Ivy.
And yes, Louise, I am recording this.
Okay. Oh, there.
Mhm.
It is. Yeah, before it said pause.
Well, it was paused because I got on so early and I didn't just want a recording of me sitting there. So 10:57. Good morning, everyone. As you're joining us.
Hello.
Good to see your names. We don't see all your faces, but we see your names, which is great. And Hal, I saw the change on your website was made to purchase the book.
Okay, what does it say now?
It just basically says place order here.
Oh yeah, because it said before that, it said it's coming or something like, yeah, I asked my web guy that my web guy actually goes to my church and lives, I could walk to his house from here. So it's nice to have somebody close, you know.
Those are the best connections, for sure.
Well, when it comes to that kind of stuff, I had a woman up in Colorado, and I mean, they can be anywhere, obviously, but it's just nice when it's somebody that you know. He's been to my home, sat down with my computer and so on. It's a nice feeling to have somebody like that, because tech stuff freaks me out.
Yeah. Well, especially when if you have time to sort it out, that's one thing, you know, but yeah, when you're actually on a presentation, that's another story. So
how many do we have so far? Do we know?
10.
10?
Yeah. So people like to join a minute or so, after it. So people are, starting to join more rapidly.
3 people entered the waiting room. It says 2 people entered.
I think they're in because we're up to 15.
Yeah, that's Louise's job. She's doing a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll give it a couple of minutes so we
Sure.
can get the majority of the people in. We don't want anyone to miss one single word, valuable word you have to say.
Hello, Hellerman.
Hi,
Hey,
who
everybody.
is speaking to me?
Frank Alaco.
Oh,
Hi,
Frank
Frank.
is there, and Kevin. All right, my buddies are showing up.
Yeah,
Wow,
all your
pressure's on now. I better be good today.
Well, you know, that's it. You have your 2 friends on, so that's
Oh, and
it.
I see a Jesuit has come into the program. Father somebody, I didn't catch it. Frank, where are you?
I'm in New Jersey, sitting on my mother's porch.
You are. I'll be
First
darned.
time I've seen her in 18 months, so we're enjoying the
Oh.
time together.
Good for you.
Isn't that Frank, isn't that a virtual background though? Are you in it looks like a barn.
Oh yeah, you want to see the real background? Hold on. Let me give it a real background.
Like the trees,
Our USF community can see what you're up to, Frank.
Yeah, there you go. Hold on, I gotta figure this out. I'll show you New Jersey. Give me 1 second.
Well, while we're waiting to see your background. Oh, very nice.
There you go. There's the front yard. My mother has a beautiful porch that she lives on. don't know if you can see my mother. Here, say hello, Ma.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everybody.
I don't know if you can see her.
Hi, Mrs. Alaco.
I'm happy to have Frank home. Hope you don't miss him too much.
She's gonna
Aw.
get mad. She's gonna get mad at me because she didn't have her hair done.
We didn't get a close up, so it's okay.
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 Sorry about that. It looks very nice. Nice weather.
Beautiful out here. You know, it's funny. It's a small town, so I walked down to the diner to have breakfast with my father's old cronies. And today it took me 2 hours to get home because I see people on the side of the road and I got catch up with people. I saw one of my football teammates who happened to be here visiting his mother from Cape Cod. So we sit on the side of the road and talk for an hour. So it's been great. It's kind of fun. Small town
Aw.
America.
That's
And
so
then every
fun.
pole in town has a picture of a war veteran. And so it's all these people that we grew up with. There's my dad's up there, you know, and my uncles. And so it's kind of like a walk down memory lane, looking at all these incredible pictures of this very patriotic town. You know, it's cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and start. We want every minute we can with Hal. He has a lot of inspiring, wonderful things to say. So thank you for joining us today for this conversation on the power of good news with Hal Urban. Hal will start off by briefly talking about his books. Then we will open up to a question and answer session where we encourage you to ask questions in the chat, which I will be monitoring. And first off, a little bit about Hal. Hal Urban has been writing about good news, positive words, and good character for more than 30 years. Even before the staggering losses of 2020, we were starving for good news. His main point is there's actually far more good news in the world than there is bad. It just needs more exposure. It has the power to uplift and enrich our lives. For 36 years, Hal was an award-winning teacher at San Carlos and Woodside High Schools and at his alma mater, USF, which he attended on a basketball scholarship. And starting the same year Father Paul was born, was that 1958?
58. Yeah.
58, and earned 3 degrees. He is USF through and through. He has not only attended the university, but his wife and 3 sons did as well. Hal continues to generously support USF in many ways as a donor, mentor, and volunteer. Hal has been speaking both nationally and internationally about good character and the impact good news has on us and how we can spread it since 1995. At the urging of his friends, former students, colleagues, readers, and people who have heard him speak, he has put his message into writing. After Hal discusses his book, like I mentioned, we'll open up the chat to questions you may have for Hal. We will also be raffling off 3 books to participants, thanks to development for donating those. So look for an email later today. You may be the winner. I also wanted to note that Hal is a very generous donor to USF. All the proceeds of this book are being donated to USF and 4 character education organizations. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Hal Urban.
Thanks, Susie, and hi, everybody. I'm honored to be here with you, and I hope what I have to say today gives you some ideas about lifting your own spirits and lifting the spirits of other people. I do want to mention one other thing in addition to what Susie said about my own particular background. She mentioned that I taught in 2 high schools. I taught in the Sequoia Union High School District, and that was a 35-year period. That was my full-time job. I was an adjunct professor at USF actually for 36 years, but I taught full-time in high school from 1966 to 2001, 35 years. So after 35 years with teenagers, I've now been in recovery for the last 20 years. It was in 2001 that I retired from the classroom. But anyway, I have been staying busy. I've been involved in a great movement called character education, helping kids develop good character while helping them increase in knowledge. And that's been a fantastic experience for me. And I have been able to do a lot of speaking, and this is my 8th book, and I'm really happy to share it with you. So what I'm going to do is just give you, I've got about 13 or 14 slides here. I'm going to give you just an overview of the book. You can see it in front of you, The Power of Good News, and it's about feeding your mind with what's good for your heart. So let me move on. Okay, let me define the way I'm defining good news so you'll understand what I mean. Anything you see, hear, read, or do that makes you feel good. And I think you'll see that as I go through the slides here. At the beginning of the book, I list 3 reasons why I wanted to write about good news. Number 1, and the more research I did on it, the more this was confirmed. Good news is good for our health, both physical and mental. And some people would add spiritual and emotional. Number 2, I have a hard time convincing some people of this, but I'm going to try to do it in the book. There is far more good news than there is bad news. The only thing is that bad news gets a lot more publicity. And then the last thing is spreading good news adds joy. What I mean by spreading it is that the last chapter is called Pass It On, and I'm asking people to share good news with other people. It adds joy not only to their lives, but it adds joy to your life as well. I have at the beginning of the book, I'm sure you're familiar with this, it's called the symbol, the yin yang symbol. It comes from ancient China. And it basically describes life. Life is a mixture of dark and light, or good and evil, whatever terms you want to say. In this situation, the dark is the yin. And of course, you see a white circle in there. That means there's a potential and some good inside of the dark side. Just as we went through COVID, there were still a lot of beautiful things that happened during COVID. The bright side also has the potential for dark. One of the examples I use is the internet. If somebody asked me, what's the greatest development of your lifetime, I would say the internet, because we have been able to do so many fabulous things and get so much information and so on, and we're using it right now. But it also has a dark side. And one good example is all of the conspiracy theories and the bullying and scamming and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a mixture, but what the news media does is that they focus on that dark side. And what I'm really trying to do in this book is to get people to understand that the bright side is there. It just doesn't get as much exposure, and we have to look for it. So chapter 1 is called Wake Up Call. And I just want to tell you a brief little story here, because it really did wake me up. I was about in my early 30s, I think, and I was reading a lot of books about self-development, and a friend of mine said, oh, have you ever read a book by Zig Ziglar? Now, I don't know how many of you people out there have heard of Zig Ziglar. He died, I think, about 5 or 6 years ago, but he was what you call a motivational speaker. And I thought the guy was joking when he said the name Zig Ziglar. I thought that was a joke. And then I found out he was from Yazoo City, Mississippi. And I thought the guy was pulling my leg. And turned out Zig Ziglar from Yazoo City is the real thing. And I went over to Oakland and attended a workshop that he gave. And it was absolutely fabulous. And one of the things he said early in the morning, he asked us a question. He said, would you allow anybody to come into your living room with 2 50-pound sacks of garbage over their shoulder and then dump that garbage in your living room? And everybody was wondering, well, why did he ask that question? And then he later said, do you allow anybody to dump garbage into your mind? And that was the wake-up call, because we had a discussion group and we talked about the fact that we do allow a lot of garbage dumped into our mind. It has a negative effect on our health and our mood and everything else. So that, like I say, that's called wake up call. Then the good news thing kind of started by accident, but it led to this book, and it led to something that I did for probably 33 of my years of teaching. When I was teaching in the high school, I was a social studies teacher, and I taught those courses that everybody wants to take, like American government and United States history and world studies and things like that. But I always thought that we should be able to tie those subjects to what is going on in the current world today. So I had a current events component of each class. The students were, back in those days, it was mostly newspapers. And back in those days, they got a newspaper and they picked out 5 stories that caught their attention. And all they had to do was just kind of summarize it in 2 sentences. And so they became pretty well informed. But one day in class, one of the kids said, you know, Mr. Urban, he said, for being such a positive guy, he says, you sure give a negative homework assignment. And I thought, whoa, me, negative? And I was kind of thrown off, you know, and I didn't want to have that reputation of giving a negative assignment every day. But I was aware that most of the news was bad. I remember asking once in political science class, why is all the news bad news? And the professor said, because good news doesn't sell. And that's still true today. So anyway, I wanted to get something positive in the class. And I said, well, why don't we, after we do the news, or maybe even when we start, I said, why don't we talk about the good news? And they said, what good news? And I said, well, is there good news in your life? Is there good news in your family? Is there good news at the school? Is there good news in our community? Let's share good things that are going on. And the kids really took to it. These were seniors in high school in that particular class, but it worked just as well with freshmen. And they really took to it, and they celebrated each other and their happiness. And I still remember the first time we ever did this. There was a girl that shared something very personal. Her parents had been separated for about 1.5 years, and they had just gotten back together. And she was so happy to share that with the class. And the class, you know, there were a couple tears, but they cheered for her, and everybody was happy, and they all got closer together. And I started doing that, and it really led to something really fantastic. And the kids always look forward to the beginning of class because we shared positive things. I was teaching at the same time, I was teaching adults at USF. I was in the College of Professional Studies, and all of my students were in their 30s, 40s, and some older. And I asked them one day, I said, let me tell you something I do with my high school kids. I said, if you think it's kind of corny or childish, I said, tell me. But if you think you want to give it a try here in our class, these are adults who had worked all day and were now attending a 3-hour class at night. And one guy raised his hand and he said, man, he said, with the kind of day I had today, he says, I could really use some good news. He said, let's go for it. And these adults, again, in their 30s, 40s, some in their 50s, they started sharing things from their lives, and it had the same impact. I sometimes think it was better. It worked even better there with these adults. And they said, boy, I need this. And they came looking forward to class. So that was essentially, that was what led to this, the book. Okay, now this is something that you already know. We are on bad news overload. We have been on bad news overload for many, many years, as long as there's been a news media. And there are 2 reasons for that. One is economic. As I said earlier, bad news sells, good news does not sell. And the other one is that we're born with a kind of what some people call a negativity bias. We're born with a defensive, I forget what you call it, but there's part of our brain that triggers anything that signifies danger. And if you can imagine people many years ago, when there were big animals that were stronger and faster and hungrier than the humans were, they had to hear things that were signals that there was danger, and we still have that system built in. So it gets our attention. Anything negative or dangerous or threatening gets our attention very quickly. And then in chapter 4, that's where I try to make the point that there's more good news than there is bad news, and that the world is getting better all of the time. I want to share a book with you. I think, yeah, it's only one word, but it's in 3 lines there. It's called Factfulness. And it's written by this amazing man. His name is Hans Rosling. He was from Sweden. And he was both an MD and a PhD. And he devoted a good chunk of his life to proving that the world is better and getting better all of the time. And I highly recommend it. It's easy to read. It's based on facts, and it's fantastic. And then another thing I do in this chapter is I go through my whole life cycle. I'm 80 now, and I go through it and explain all of the things that have gotten better in the 80 years that I've been on the earth. And I think that will continue to happen. Okay, happy hormone research. You guys have, I'm assuming you've heard the term happy hormones before. I sometimes get them mixed up, but one of the side benefits of writing this book was that I ended up doing so many Google searches on neuroscience, and I had no idea it was going to lead to that. But we have these happy hormones in us. Let me, oh, wait a minute. I thought, okay, here they are. I think you've probably seen these before. Serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins, and dopamine. And the real truth is they sound like drugs. But the interesting thing is, in a way, they are drugs. They're happy drugs, they're healthy drugs, and we produce them ourselves in our own bodies based on our experiences. If we're having happy experiences, we do exercise or whatever, we can produce these own good feelings without going out and spending on illegal drugs or anything like that. So I'm really big on the happy hormones, and that chapter explains a little bit about it. Chapter 6 is called Looking for the Good. I remember Zig Ziglar on that day, another term he left that stuck in my head forever. He says, be a good finder. He said, if you look for the good, you'll find it. And we have to look for the good more than look for the bad, because the bad news will bombard us anyway. And as it says there in the subtitle of that chapter, it may require an attitude adjustment. I want to very briefly tell you a story about one of the people that had the most influence on my life. And he was a fellow student at USF. This is way back in the year, probably 1959, 1960. He was 1 year behind me. He lived in, it's Burl Toller Hall now, but it was Phelan Hall then. That was the only dorm on campus. And he lived on the same floor I did. And Bruce was paralyzed because of polio. He was in a wheelchair. He could not move his arms. He could only move he sat in a wheelchair with a desktop in the front there, and he could move his fingers and his hands, but he couldn't lift his arms, and he couldn't move his legs. He could move his head a little, and his brain worked fine. But he was the most positive guy I ever met in my life, and he was always upbeat and everything. And I asked him one day, I said, Bruce, how can you be so positive all the time? And he said, Hal, it's a choice. He said, remember the Jesuits taught us that we have a free will. And I did remember that. And he said, but I've learned that attitude is the control center of my life. He said, I can't control the fact that I can't move my arms and legs, but there's a lot of things in my life that I can control. And he said, that starts with my attitude. And he said, I wake up every morning and 2 words pop in my head. Number 1, thankfulness. And number 2, opportunity. And he said, I'm thankful for what I do have, and I'm thankful for all the opportunities I had that day to make it a good life. And I just, a conversation that he and I had privately in the green and gold room that we called it in those days, is a conversation I'll never forget. Attitude is a control center of life. Okay, the chapter 7 is Count Your Blessing, and I had my own belief that people who are thankful find more good than people that don't. But that was, again, just my own belief. And then when I started researching that, a lot of people in positive psychology, which started at the University of Pennsylvania many years ago, they verify absolutely that the more thankful you are, the more good you're going to find. And I have a quote in there from my mother. My mom, Ruth, lived from 1913 to 2009. And the greatest thing she ever taught me was to be thankful. And it has really influenced my life a lot. I quoted her. She said, "The happiest people in the world aren't the people who have the most things. The happiest people who are the ones who are most thankful for what they do have." And boy, there's a huge difference there. And I will forever be thankful to my mom for that. Chapter 8 is about friendships. As a matter of fact, if you get the book, you will see that this book is dedicated to 21 people. That's kind of an unusual number of people to dedicate to, but these are people that I made friends with at USF 60 some years ago, 1958, 59, 60, around in there. And they're mostly my fraternity brothers, but there's 2 women in there that were nurses at USF at that time. They were the only women we had on campus at that time, and they married fraternity brothers of mine. But again, that was what I had, just kind of a personal belief. Good friends make us healthier. And the more research I did on that, the more that it proved that loneliness is one of the worst things that can happen to us. And good friends help. Again, I don't want to explain the whole book, but this has really been proven scientifically. The last chapter is called Pass It On. And this basically is, don't just bring in good news. When you have good news, share it with others, because it's always win-win. You'll feel good sharing it, and you're going to make somebody else feel really good. I tell a story in here about another guy that was one of the most significant people in my life. His name was Tim Hansel, and we taught together at San Carlos High School. And he was kind of like Bruce in terms of being very positive all the time. But one of the things I noticed about Tim was that he always has something positive to say. It was always uplifting. I call him a life enhancer. And I asked him one day, I said, "Tim, is there a story behind the fact that you always have something positive to say?" And he said, "Yeah, there really is." He said, "I was really lucky." He said, "I grew up with 2 really positive, happy, funny parents." And he said, "We had a family motto, and the motto was always have something good to say." And I've never forgotten that either. What a great motto to grow up with. My father was an amazingly negative person, and he was a good man in many ways, but he was angry and negative, and he swore a lot. I talk about that in the book, and it was something that I had to overcome. But Tim really helped me when he said, "Always have something good to say." Okay, that's the overview of the book. So we can go anywhere. Susie, I don't know what you want to do from this point on, but questions or anything is fine with me. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Hal.
Okay.
Your book sounds very uplifting, intriguing, interesting, all of that.
Can I mention one thing before I forget, because you and I talked about this earlier. I know that if you're like me and you buy a lot of books, Amazon is the first place you go. And I appreciate that, because I buy a lot of books on Amazon. But in this case, my preference would be that you buy it directly from me, from my website, which is halurban.com. Not because you're going to put more money in my pocket. I'm giving all of the money from royalties and from any other profits from sales. I'm giving it to mostly education, to USF, which was mentioned. I already give quite a bit to. I owe USF still. And I belong to these character education organizations, which I really believe in has been a great thing. And I can give much more money to these organizations if you buy it from me than if you buy from Amazon. Amazon, I'll end up with it literally about 60 cents. And if you buy it from me, I'll end up with $9 or $10. There's a big difference between that. And again, I'm passing it on. So I did want to mention that.
Thank you, Hal. We have gotten a few comments and a couple questions. So starting with the comments. So Than Lee had you as a teacher, and she said, "You inspire me."
Thank you.
So,
As a teacher at USF or someplace else?
I'm assuming USF.
Okay.
Yeah. And then Kevin Leong equates thankfulness as having a sense of appreciation.
Absolutely.
And she said, sorry, I stand corrected. Woodside High School.
Oh, Woodside. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. And then Miranda, she made the comment, Paul Zak is an author who wrote a book on neurological research on oxytocin and trust that she recommends.
Okay. Yeah.
So let's see. So we have a question, really beautiful talk from Hal. My question, what do you have to say about grief and grieving?
You know, what do I have to say about grief and grieving? It's something that we all go through. You know, I remember one time when I was teaching seniors a class in developmental psychology. This is in seniors in high school. And I was telling them about attitude, and I was telling them about Bruce and about how attitude is a choice. And the kids some of them didn't quite grasp it, because one kid said, well, what am I supposed to do when my best friend gets killed or my mother dies? I'm supposed to be happy about it. And I said, no, that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm not saying you should be happy all the time. None of us can be happy all the time. I said, but we go through a natural grieving process. It's kind of hard to escape that, or we shouldn't want to escape it. That's just part of a process when we suffer a loss. But our attitude is, how are we going to deal with it in a healthy, effective way? And like I said to the kid at that time, let's say your best friend is killed, and it's an awful thing to talk about, but you're going to grieve. But then you have to ask yourself at some point, as you start to heal, what's the best tribute I can ever give to my best friend? What's something that I can take from him that'll be part of me for the rest of my life? And I said, it's really your choice of an attitude. You can pay tribute to that friend, or you can feel sorry for yourself for too long. So grieving is part of life. I've had a lot of grieving periods in my life. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And from Jamie Burke, thank you so much, Hal. I have learned so much from you today. And question for you, what do you recommend for how to stay away from clickbait on the internet? Sometimes I'm going about my day and focused on the task at hand, and something negative comes up on the screen that makes me want to click.
Well, I guess it depends on what it is. I know that those of us who are on the internet a lot, and I spend a lot of time on the internet, is that I just have to tell myself that I'm not going to get sucked into something negative that's going to make me feel bad. If it's a news item and I want to know more about it, I'll pursue it a little bit. But otherwise, these people that operate the internet, especially the advertising people, they know how to get your attention and pull you in. And I think we just have to set some boundaries for ourselves. And
if it's too good to be true, it usually is. Not always. And here is a question. My daughter is an incoming freshman as psych major at USF. Will you be teaching in any aspect? Oh, no, I haven't taught at USF since 2001. At that point, I was starting to do a lot of speaking all over the place, and I was also writing books. And
and I thought I was going to teach at USF forever, but I realized I just couldn't do that and write books and do a lot of speaking. So I would be happy to do a guest appearance or a talk or something like that, but I think I've paid my dues on regular everyday teaching.
And from Anna Harper, great presentation and topic, Hal, thank you. Fully believe in the power of good news. Any advice on how to share if the news is about ourselves or close family? There is the fear that we may come across as bragging.
Yeah, I think that's always a risk. I always tell people, you know, because we even did that when we shared things when I started with my high school kids, and then I did with my USF adults. That issue came up. Well, what is it? It sounds like we're bragging, but I think when you share news that really makes you happy, and you don't continue to talk about it, especially if it's some accomplishment of yours, but I think you can do it without coming across as bragging. I mean, if you celebrate you're happy because you had your first grandchild, that's obviously not bragging. But if you say this is the most beautiful grandchild that ever lived, or the smartest, or something like that, then it goes beyond that. But I think we can share a lot of good news without bragging, as long as you're not talking about just yourself and what you've achieved.
Great. And from Sarah Cami, thanks, Hal. I'm a professor at USF, and I love the idea of starting or even ending each class with positive news.
You know, I want to comment on that, because it took me a while to figure this out. But actually, I wrote a book for teachers. It's called 20 Things Good Teachers Do, and it's mostly for teachers who teach elementary school, middle school, or high school. Not so much for college professors, but there's something that may apply here. I have a chapter in my book about always make your students feel welcome. And you know, I was teaching in high school, and as you know, in a normal schedule, they change classes every hour. So one group goes out and the other group is coming in. I would go out in the hallway and I would stand by the door, and I would individually welcome every student who came into my class the same way I would welcome a friend coming into my home. It threw them off a little bit at the beginning of the year, but then they got used to that warm greeting, and it made them feel important. And we had a nice friendly exchange before they came in. And I told the kids, I said, you know, I'm like a rechargeable battery standing here at the door. If you come with some positive energy and infuse me with it, I'll be a better teacher today. And they thought I was kidding, but I was a little bit, but I was also serious about it, because we transfer energy to one another. You know, Frank Alaco is in this. He's a really energetic guy. I like being around him because he transfers his energy to me. And that was one of the most important things I ever did as a teacher, because I had literally physical contact with every one of those kids in a verbal exchange before they came into my classroom. So we always did start very positive. And and when I was teaching at USF, now it was a different situation, because they were coming in at different times and so on. But I did do the same thing. I always made a point to be somewhere near the door. And if I missed them at the door, I would go over their desk and make a chat with them, you know, before we started. And so that's something that always gets class started positive, is a welcome at the door.
And from Heidi Tate, thank you, Hal. It's an honor to learn from you. How do you politely deflect or spin into a positive direction a negative conversation?
Oh, that's always a challenge. You know, I don't know if I have a particular key, because the circumstances of those negative conversations are always different. But I will try to change the subject, or if it's something particularly negative, I'll just say, why don't we talk about something that's happier than that? Like, for instance, I avoid talk as people we've been advised for a long time, try not to get in arguments about religion or politics. And even the people that I dedicated the book to from USF, we have reunions, and we've had several of them over a 60-year period. But one of the things that we had to do before one of our reunions is let's have a no politics rule for our reunions, and it improved things. So they're just, it all depends on the circumstances. But sometimes I'll just say, let's move in another direction and find something happy to talk about. It varies.
And Hal, out of your 8 books, which book is your favorite and why?
Oh, probably the first one, because it got me started. I got turned down by 30 publishers, and it was a long, long haul. It is dedicated to my 3 boys who all went to USF. It was originally called 20 Things I Want My Kids to Know. And it was 20 things that I wanted to pass on to my 3 sons and to my students, because I always felt, in fact, that was the reason I wrote the book. I felt we were doing a really good job of teaching academics in high schools, but we didn't teach them about important things about how life works. And it was really basically about good character. And so I ended up writing this book, 20 Things I Want My Kids to Know. And it eventually I found a publisher, got it published, and then that publisher got bought up by somebody else, and they took the book out of print, and then I published it myself. And it's hard for me to believe as I say this, I sold 65,000 copies of it out of my garage. And then it won a national award, and Simon & Schuster bought it, and they've sold 500,000. And so it's changed my life a lot. It led to a lot of speaking. It led to 7 other books. But I really think it's just got some good basic information in it that I would want kids to be taught as they're growing up. And so it's called Life's Greatest Lessons now, and it's available Amazon, bookstores. It's still doing well. I still get a royalty check every year. And but anyway, that's probably my favorite because it's first, but my new one is my favorite because it's the most recent.
And from Susan Hopp, what about dealing with some of the critical issues facing us today, like climate breakdown? Any suggestions to bring in the seriousness that can't be sugar-coated, not to go doomsday yet? The consequences are existential, ...
Yeah, I never, and one of the things I say in the beginning of the book is that I'm not telling people to avoid the bad news or ignore it, or act like it doesn't exist. It does, and we need to be well informed. And things like the climate, we need to do everything we can to contribute to cleaning up our climate and those types of things. But sometimes I get accused of being a Pollyanna, that I think everything is wonderful and I ignore the negative side of life. I don't at all. I'm very realistic. I've suffered a lot in my own life. I've had unfair things happen to me. I'm aware of the negativity that does exist in the world, but I think we have to focus our own energies on the more positive side. I hope that answered the question. If not, somebody could repeat it to me.
Okay. And a question from Frank Alaco. How do you stay positive in relationships that have been polarized in the current divisive climate?
Politically, primarily. Yeah, I have a number of friends, including some of my fraternity brothers that I dedicated this book to, that are, let me put it this way, a little bit farther to the right than I am. And we just have agreements that that we don't talk about politics, or if we do, that we listen and respond and so on. Two of my best friends are both married USF people, and they're among the two that the book is dedicated to. They belong to a different political party than I do, but we respect each other's beliefs, and we don't argue. We just try to understand each other. But essentially, we don't talk a lot about those things that separate us. We talk about the things that connect us, like our USF experience and the fact that we've been good friends for 67 years.
Thank you. And I noticed when I was Googling you that that you have many quotes, which I love quotes. For example, being thankful and saying thanks are two habits of people who have discovered what it means to succeed in life. And kind words cost little, but accomplish much. So those are a couple of them. Is there a favorite quote that you have?
You know, I do have a favorite quote, and it just happens to be right here in front of me. I never want to forget this. It's a, you see this? It's a little thing it's a card, and it's a quote from Horace Mann. Horace Mann was the father of public education, and I won't read the whole quote. I'll just read the last sentence of the quote, and it's in the book. Also, we do ourselves the most good doing something for others. You know, I think we grow up in a capitalist society, and we're taught kind of subconsciously, what can I get? What can I get? What can I get? But the real key, I think, to a happy life is helping other people. It's always win-win. It always makes you feel really good. And it took me a while to, to understand that. But I remember one of the things that Zig Ziglar said too. He says, you can get everything you want in life if you help other people get what they want. And it's, like I say, it's always win-win. And I don't want to sit here and give you a bunch of stories. It sounds like I'm bragging about what I do for other people, but teaching itself it's a service profession, and you're trying to help other people in their lives. And that was what was so rewarding about it. And even writing, I think I mentioned in the introduction to this book that writing is an extension of my teaching. I always feel like I'm a teacher when I'm writing a book. But anyway, back to quotes. Every book I have has a lot of quotes in them. I think this one has more than 100. And I like the way my publisher displayed the quotes. If you've seen the book, they put them in little, what do you call those, bubbles like you see in cartoons or something like that. They put all the quotes in those. It looks pretty clever.
Here's a logistics question.
Mm-hmm.
How come I can't have more than 2 items in my cart?
That's really interesting, because that's on my to-do list today. I get that question. A friend of mine wanted to buy a whole bunch of books, and he said, I can't put 2 more in my cart. And I've got that on my to-do list right here in front of me to talk to my webmaster today to find out how we can change that. Because one of the things I can do with people, like there's a guy up in Washington that has already bought 40 copies of the book. And the way I did that with him is I just sent him an invoice, and then he pays through PayPal, and then I ship him the books. But I'm working on that problem. I don't know the exact answer to it, but we're going to see if we can fix it.
So stay tuned. Sounds like it's going to be fixed eventually.
I hope so, yeah.
Any wise words for an incoming freshman to USF from out of state to stay positive in this exciting transition?
Well, one of the most important things, I think, is to be around people that lift you up, to be around positive people. That's when people ask me about my USF experience, if I listed all of the good things about it, the friendships that I made, the lasting friendships, would be one of the single most important things. In addition to the fact that because I became a teacher, my professors at USF were very caring and very positive people themselves. And so being around those kind of professors and then being with guys, that it was all guys, as I say, at that time, that were positive. And I think, again, it goes back to chapter, well, it's the last two chapters in the book. Chapter 8 is on friendship, and chapter 9 is on passing it on. And I really think that's key.
So this is a very important question. How do you, or do you autograph your books or personalize them?
Yeah, whoever buys them directly from me, I bought 1,000 of them. And so I've got some money invested. But I tell people, I said, if you buy from Amazon, you're going to get a book. If you buy from me, you will get a personalized autograph dated book with a cool bookmark. And your money, about $10 of it, all my profit will go to the USF and other educational organizations.
So how, if someone wants it personalized, is there a way that they can, how can they convey the message that
they just send me an email and tell me that they want the book personalized, because I sent out, well, the guy up in Washington that has bought 40, he's bought 20 twice, but he gave me the names and I personalized all 40 of those and signed them and sent them to him. So I do that for anybody who requests it.
Okay, so they should send you an email versus ordering it on your website?
Well, I mean, they order the book on the website, but if they would, but if they send me an email and say, here's a list of names of the people I like you to personalize them to, that's what I'll do. And then I just print it out and I sit down and sign the books and personalize them to these people.
Okay, great. We'll put Hal's email in the chat in a moment.
Okay, yeah. If they can remember my name, they can remember my email. It's halurban@halurban.com.
Okay. Urban.com. Okay, and let's see here from Kevin. Hal, you're a great example in not just talking the talk, but also walking the walk. Thanks for all you do and all you've done for USF and the world.
Well, I appreciate that comment. I have to admit, it took me a lot of years to figure life out. You know, I didn't get off to a good start. And I think I started to really change when I got to USF. So I'll always be thankful for some of the Jesuits and the lay people there who really helped me turn my life around.
And with that, how do you stay so healthy? At 80 years old, you look like you're much younger and
well,
definitely have a lot of energy.
You know, I want to show you a book here. Can you read the title?
Positive Addiction.
Positive Addiction. One of my great heroes in life was a man named William Glasser. He's the author of this book, and he got involved. He wrote a book called Reality Therapy, which I thought was one of the greatest books I ever read. This is way back in the mid 60s, probably. And then he got involved in education later, and I had the opportunity to meet him at a conference in Florida. He wrote a book called Schools Without Failure, which was a fantastic book. But he wrote this book called Positive Addiction. And we always think of addiction as a negative term, but there is such a thing as positive addiction. Just like there's good news, not just bad news, there's also positive addiction. And when I first experienced it, was that many years ago, I became a long distance runner. And you've probably heard of the thing called the runner's high. When you go out and you exercise a lot, you feel so good afterwards. And I stay healthy at 80 years of age, primarily because I work out twice every day. I go to a gym in the morning, I work out for an hour, and 15 minutes. And then just before lunch, normally I would be there right now. I go down to the park and I walk a couple of miles and do a bunch of push-ups and stretching and so on. And I'm hooked on it. I'm addicted to it. It's been going on for a long time. But again, you go back to the happy hormones. They kick in every single time I work out. So I'm extremely thankful that I'm healthy enough to do that. And it just makes me more healthy.
And as mentioned, you're a lifetime loyal donor to USF and have given over 128 times since you graduated. What inspires you to continue to invest in the future of USF? Well,
USF, as I mentioned, it did so much for me. I don't know where I'd be without it. And in addition to that, I got a lot of free tuition from USF, and that's another reason why I wanted to give back, because I went there on a basketball scholarship, and it was what they call a full ride. I didn't pay for, for anything. And then because I started teaching there, when I went back for my master's degree and my doctorate, excuse me, I also got reduced tuition because of my status there as a teacher. And that then we got help when my kids went there, and my wife went back and got her degree there. So I feel like I need to pay them back for two reasons: how much they helped me develop as a human being, what they taught me about life, and how much free education I got. So I've given back a lot, and they're gonna, when I die, they're gonna get a huge chunk, believe me.
Thank you. Thank you for that. All right. Well, we're almost at the top of the hour. Are there any other questions? Any other questions for Hal? We appreciate you donating your time today.
Oh, I'm
as
happy
well.
to do it. Like I say, USF asked me to do anything, the answer would probably be yes.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure working with you and Louise as well. I know you work very closely with Louise.
Yeah, Louise is awesome. She and Frank are what I call good news friends. Every time I see their face, and Kevin too is here. They're all good news friends. That's what that chapter is about. It says good friends, good news, and I really appreciate friendship.
Oh, well, thank you for that. And this has been recorded, so I'll be posting it on the HR site as well for those who either want to watch it again or share it with others.
Okay.
Share the good news.
All right. Thanks, Susie. I really appreciate all your help in putting this together.
Oh, it's
Kevin
been
is
great.
waving. Hi, Kevin.
All your fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of in the chat. I'm so glad I attended. Love it. All great, positive stuff to send us through the day and the rest of the week.
Good. I hope so. And I hope the book will be something that people revisit and so on. I know the best books of my life, I go back and revisit them a lot because they always have that same positive influence on me, and they reinforce what they taught me before.
Well, and again, we'll be raffling off 3. So if you've attended today, I'll be emailing you later today, compliments of development. So thank you, Louise and Kevin.
You're welcome. Thank you, Susie. And thank you so much, Hal.
Glad to be with you, all of you.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.